SYS Presents Adventures in Online Education.
Welcome, online educators. You're listening to SYS Presents Adventures in Online Education. I'm your host, Natalie Conway. Thanks for being here. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. I am so glad you're here. You're going to want to head over to aoepodcast.org and enter your info at the bottom of the page to start receiving the AOE newsletter. It's a little piece of positivity for your inbox. Returning listeners, I hope you know that I appreciate you so much. If you like AOE, you're going to love our new daily podcast, This Day in Education. Learn about important people, events, and inventions that have shaped education in the U.S. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or at thisdayined.org. Okay, now to today's awesomeness. I have the pleasure of speaking with Amanda VanBuren, art educator, mom, and a friend of mine. Amanda has been a high school art educator for nearly 20 years. She spent her first 13 years teaching at two large inner-city public high schools in Southern California, and the last 6 years in online education here in the state of Oregon. She has taught a range of art courses, including Art 1, painting, digital art, photography, ceramics, and illustration. She loves helping students push outside of their comfort zones, open their minds, and gain confidence through creative risk-taking, experimentation, and a what-if mindset. Today, Amanda and I talk about how to engage students in art education online and what art education is really all about. It's going to be so fun. So, you ready? Let's learn something new. Amanda, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I'm so excited to talk to you, friend.
Thank you for having me, Natalie. Glad to be here.
This is going to be so good. Before we dive into the hard-hitting art questions, I'm curious, what is your favorite kind of art to create? What do you like to do in your free art time?
Okay, so favorite questions are always really hard for me because I have a really hard time narrowing it down to just one. So I have two answers. Is that okay?
Always.
Okay. So my answers are kind of like they're like opposite ways of art making. So like on one end, the art that I really love to create is anything where I have a challenge of visually communicating an idea like in a really clever or creative way. And I think that's why I always loved being in an art class, like as a student, especially like illustration classes, because each project we got was like a creative problem that I had to solve, or there was some kind of limitation that I needed to work within. As an example, I took an illustration class once in college, and we had this really weird teacher. I think all art teachers in college all art teachers are kind of weird, but including myself. But one of our assignments was to illustrate the word shamanism. And I knew nothing about the topic. Obviously, I'm like 19 years old. Like, who knows what a shaman is?
Wow.
So, you start researching and learning, and you start to geek out on all of the stories and facts, and this richness of ideas starts to evolve. And, then there's the challenge of how you're going to take all of those ideas that you're learning and connect them succinctly kind of into like one compelling visual product that communicates what you were setting out to communicate. So that's fun, but that was like before I had a kid, when I like to do a lot of thinking and I had time to do that. So you know what it's like.
I do, yes.
So like on the other side of the spectrum or whatever, I love not thinking at all. And that's what I do now, is just creating without any plan or prompt, and just making marks on paper and like letting an idea just kind of pop out organically. I actually stopped making art for a really long time. And as an art teacher, that's kind of embarrassing to admit it. Like my daughter's almost 5 years old. So I haven't really done a lot of art, and I wanted to start getting back into a creative habit, but I didn't really know where I wanted to go. So I just started making blobs of watercolor in my sketchbook, like circular blobs and square blobs.
Cool.
Yeah. But then I would look at them and see what they reminded me of. Like, is this a face or, an animal or a creature? And then I would like build onto them. And I started to create all these really wondrous little creatures. And I don't know what I'm going to do with them, but my
That's
daughter
so
loves them.
fun.
It's
That's
value enough if
great.
my daughter likes them. Yeah.
Yes. That reminds me of the book The Artist's Way. Have you heard of that?
Somebody gave me that book a long time ago and I never read it. So
I'm such a bookworm. I loved it. A friend gave it to me as well. And it speaks to just what you said about how you are a creative person, you are an artist. And then sometimes life gets in the way. We get bogged down and you don't dedicate time or space to practicing your art or engaging with it. And it's sort of a self-help book, I guess, but not entirely, not like completely in that genre, but it talks
Mm.
about just how to get back into it, and you make dates with yourself to go and do something fun or creative. And that just made me think of it. I'm so glad you got back into it. That's awesome.
Oh man, I need that book. Well, it's a practice, right? And it's showing up and
Yeah.
doing, trying to be consistent. All the things I tell my students that like I try to do, but you got that 5-year-old kid that
It's
just
hard.
it's hard.
It's hard.
I always say I don't have the time, but I do have the time. It's a matter of just like making the time.
As with all things. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Well, one of the other things that's hard is online education. Can we agree? Yes. Online education, though, is becoming less of a mystery to a lot of people. And there are still certain subjects, though, or domains that folks always wonder, how can you do that online? Can you give us some concrete examples of how you engage kids with art online? Is it entirely through the digital medium? What kinds of concepts are you covering? Just how do you do it?
Well, first off, I just want to talk about how do you do that online? Like literally 100% of the time when people ask me what I do, like it's, what do you do? I'm a teacher and they get really excited. Like, oh, do you teach in the district? Where do you teach? And I'm like, online. And they're like, oh, that's interesting. Well, what do you teach? And I say art. And then there's like this like long pause. And the person's face just gets really perplexed and serious. And then it's always, oh, how do you do that? It's a lot to explain. So I'm like, it's weird, but I make it work. But I'll give you more details since we're talking about it. So right now I'm teaching 2 classes, Foundations of Art, which is like an Art 1 class, like an intro class, and then an illustration course, which is more of the advanced class. So students already took the foundations and have all the skills. So I'm going to use foundations as an example because I think that's just going to be easier to explain.
Yeah, go for it.
There's a lot to that class, but a big part of it is skill building. So really learning how to see and observe, building that hand-eye coordination and just different techniques for translating our 3-dimensional world onto a flat surface. So we do drawing and painting. So even though it's online, my goal is to really just keep art class, what I remember in art class being, which is super experiential, really hands-on, and getting kids off computers and out in the world, drawing, painting. And we kind of tackle the course through the building blocks of art, which is the elements of art. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but
I'm not. Tell me.
line, shape, value, form, color, texture, space. Those are like the elements of art. So we learn skills like through that. And, we connect it to other artists and that type of thing as well. So in the beginning of the year, we send the students an art kit and they get their basic supplies like a sketchbook, drawing and painting materials. And then like so that's kind of what I do and how I do it. The easiest way for me to kind of explain it would be to give you like a summary of like a typical week. Would that work?
Yeah, a week in the life of art class with Mrs. VanBuren.
Yeah,
Yes.
online. So Mondays, and our school, like all of the teachers do this, we have what's called a weekly starter video. So it overviews like the objective of the week. I do some pre-teaching, like introduce the concept or the skill that we're working on, give a lot of examples. And then they'll have like a quiz or a small task to do based on what was in the video. And then Tuesday is our live class. So we meet once a week for an hour. And we always start with some kind of like creative or dexterity warm up just to like get their hands moving and get into the art mindset. And then we get into like the drawing activities to practice the concepts of that week, which I introed in like that Monday video. So depending on what we're doing, like I'll use slide visuals with directions. I'll use a doc cam for demo or the webcam. We use Pear Deck sometimes to help guide the students through activities. And then there's always time for like sharing our results of what we did and talking about that. So it's really kind of hands-on in our live classes. And then Wednesday and Thursday is their independent practice time, like their skill builders, or if we're like doing a project, they're doing that. So, they're really just expanding on the concepts from earlier in the week. And what I like to do is put each assignment, like, so they'll have a Wednesday skill builder and a Thursday one. I like to house everything in a slide deck. So it's a one-stop shop for everything they need. So there's like, the written info of what the task is and the goal. There's visual examples, there's video demos, links to resources like a rubric and all of that.
Very cool. That's really comprehensive.
Yeah. I mean, I think you have to be, because I'm not there with them in class every day and they're not with their peers in class every day. So you have to kind of have it pretty all clear and in there for them to access.
Really well scaffolded, it feels. Like there's not just one opportunity, there's multiple opportunities to dive into that skill or revisit a strategy or a concept. And that's really neat.
Yeah, totally. And, for all of the assignments too, like whether it's a skill builder or a project, I try to give them a lot of like voice and choice on how they want to demonstrate that objective. So there is a lot of freedom. So like, like if we're practicing a technique, like cross contour line drawing, they can choose what medium they want to use. They want to use pencil or color pencil or pen. Some kids like digital if they know how to do it. So they can choose that and they can choose their subject, like what they want to do their image of, as long as they're demonstrating the technique. And, then there's, of course, the students that don't like the freedom of choosing the subject. So I have a slide deck of lots of images that they can draw inspiration from too.
Nice. That would be the Natalies of your class. Like, no, please just tell me what to do.
Right. Too much freedom. So you try to find that balance because you get everybody in your class, like people that just want to do their own thing, people that are like, I need step by step. So yeah, you try to just give all options for everybody. And, like I said, I have all levels, like kids that it's an intro class, but I've got kids that literally draw like kindergartners because maybe they haven't drawn since they were in kindergarten. Art isn't something we do every year, like English and reading and writing. And I have some kids that are at college level. So, I try to give like options like for each level, not all assignments, but when it's appropriate or when I can do it, I try to give them like, if you're beginner level artist, pick this or whatever.
Yeah. And that's cool that they can self-select. It seems very universally designed. It's really cool to hear you speak about how you plan and prepare and then what options you're giving and the fact that you're considering voice and choice and really like, okay, this is the standard or this is the technique I want them to practice, how they do it, what their subject is. That doesn't matter to me. It's simply the skill. That's a really cool that you have that laser focus and that flexibility of options for the kids. What's the end of the week look like? What does Friday have?
So Friday, I don't assign any new work. I use that time really for them to get it all together. So they photograph their work. They do like written reflections on like their process and the product. And then they'll submit it. And I have them kind of do that all in like a slideshow. And if it's a project, I really like to see their thinking. So they also include like their evidence of their brainstorming and visual research. And like I have them submit like process photos and then like reflecting on their work. So that's Friday. And then I'll usually do like an extra credit. I call them creative cooldowns. And it's just like a fun drawing prompt to finish off the week. So just to keep them drawing and they don't have to do it, but some kids just like that extra, like draw weird things.
Yeah, absolutely. Make their blobs of watercolor into fun little critters and whatnot.
totally going to make my illustration class do that as one of their assignments at some point.
Yes, I love that. I love everything that you are saying. I think this sounds amazing. I am sure listeners are going to want to see this in action. Would you be willing to share a resource that we could put in the show notes that shows kind of what you do or what a lesson looks like?
I would love to do that. Yes, 100%.
Yay. Awesome. So listeners, check that out in the show notes. It'll be there. All right, I have another question for you. There are benefits and drawbacks to teaching in a physical classroom and teaching online. They both have their pros and cons. There's just no perfect model of education anywhere. But what are some of the advantages of teaching art online? And are there any drawbacks that you work to remedy?
Yeah, totally. There's both for sure. As far as advantages go, for me, I really just love the accessibility of online learning. So students have everything they need to access content at any time. If they want to work at midnight, they can do that. If they missed a class, they can watch a recording of the class that they missed. They can, watch the instructional videos, get all the written information, all the examples and resources, which is awesome. Because like at a brick and mortar, if a student was absent or they missed some key material for whatever reason, it could be kind of hard getting them up to speed during class where you're trying to do a million other things, or like if they weren't paying attention or they missed something, like repeating a demo 10 different times to 10 different students. It's like,
Right.
yeah. So that's just awesome. And I know like a lot of my friends who were teaching in a brick and mortar or physical classroom and then went online for the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
They're taking a lot of the stuff that they did online, like just recording screencastify videos of demos, and using them in their classrooms now and keeping more things online. So I think it's been really helpful. That has been really helpful for like physical classroom teachers, like getting more of that accessibility of content.
Those are definite awesome positives. What's the negative side? Give me the real deal.
So for me personally, the hardest part is that instant feedback and the exchange of ideas you have being in a physical classroom face to face every day. Art is just so hands-on and active. There's that like buzz in the room of, students being next to each other, seeing each other work in real time, like getting inspiration from each other, sharing feedback. Like I can look over a shoulder, although students hate that. Like I hated it when I was a art student, like my looking over the shoulder. But I can see
it's like when someone watches you type, you're just like, stop, don't do that.
Yeah, it's super awkward for everybody. But it's nice to know what's going on, right? Like where people are at in the process and what they need. I can like push them every day. And I think that like instant and continuous feedback component for an art class is like really what helps the students grow and produce their best work for sure. Like I could get really good work out of my students in a live class or physical classroom.
Mm-hmm. So how do you remedy that online? Is there a workaround for that? Is there anything you found that alleviates that disadvantage a little bit?
Yeah. So what I'm really trying to do to pull the best work out of my students is build more time for sharing works in progress, getting feedback from peers, like making that way more intentional. Obviously myself as well, and more dedicated time, like built in for revising and refining based on feedback. So I'm trying to like build that, like, for lack of a better word, like culture of feedback in the courses and like really drill that into students. And a lot of kids, and it's totally natural, are initially really scared about not only getting feedback, but also like giving feedback to other students, like authentically and not like sugarcoating it. It can be really scary to put your artwork out there, and it's like vulnerable, right? It's part of you. But it's so important to do that and to talk about it because like that's how we learn and grow. So we talk a lot about like the importance of feedback, like how it's meant to be constructive and not destructive. Like we're not competitors here, like trying to become the best artist. We're all on the same team, working together to help each other build a better product, right? We talk about like how to give good feedback, right? It's specific. that's really hard for students. I like it. It's cool. Great job. So how to be specific,
Right.
and like what to talk about and using the language of art to talk about the work, like how to do that. Being honest, right? But also like kind in your wording. So being empathetic. It's important to like, put yourself in someone's shoes when you're crafting your words. So all of
Yeah.
that, like, I've been really trying to like do a lot of that this year, and like last year a little bit, but like going full force. And we're getting there. It's not the same, but like the work I think I'm getting out of students is a lot better with all of these feedback and revisions. And I always send students like video feedback, like on their progress and what's happening for projects. But yeah, work in progress.
That's really neat. It reminds me of a class I took in college where we watched movies and then had to analyze them. And I think most of the other students in class may have come with some background knowledge that I didn't have. I was just taking it purely as an elective because I like movies. And I didn't have the language to talk about it. I was totally that student who was saying, I don't know, I just liked it. I liked it. It was good. And I struggled to analyze it in a meaningful way, and I think it's really neat that you're giving students the language, the skills to really observe art and see what they're creating and analyze what they're creating and then be able to give meaningful, specific feedback to their peers because they can say, I really liked it because you
Right.
used these heavy lines and that was, whatever it might have been. I don't know. But I think that's a really cool life skill, not just an art skill, but a life skill to be able to look at something, whether you're remodeling your house and you want a certain look or appeal, to know why you like something is really helpful when choosing from a series of designs or anything like that. I don't know. I just think that's really cool. We're going to take
Totally.
a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk more about art education and why it is so important. So stick with us. What's the one thing all online schools and programs struggle with? Student engagement and the ability to truly personalize interventions. How do we solve those problems? With the use of Admin Dash, a brand new Canvas LTI tool from SYS Education. Admin Dash allows online teachers to see a risk assessment score that proactively identifies students who may need more specialized attention or intervention, and offers a communication log that provides an outlet for complete transparency among teachers, admin, students, and families. At just 99 cents per student per year, and with no minimum price and no fees, you can't afford to not use Admin Dash. For more information about Admin Dash, contact sales at syseducation.org and start connecting proactively with your online learners. All right, before the break, Amanda, you were talking about the challenges, the advantages of teaching art online, and I just so want to be in your class now. I bet other people in the audience are feeling the same thing. Like, I would love to be in Miss VanBuren's art class, please. Like 101, I am there. But, so often we focus on subjects in school that are language arts, math, those areas when we talk about education. And so far today, you've talked about in art class asking students to be reflective, be really acute observers of their world, having them work in constraints, having them give and receive feedback. Like these are things we do in science classes. These are things we do in humanities and English classes. So I can see how a lot of the skills we're learning across the curriculum apply to art. And I totally believe that art is essential in schools and in our lives, just as human beings. I'm pretty sure you'd agree. What is it, though, about art education that specifically makes it important for students to engage with? What's your maybe favorite lesson or concept to teach? Is there a student recently who surprised you with their creativity or innovation? Sell us on art education.
Yeah, there's so many things why art is essential. Like it could take the whole podcast, and you
Love
can
it.
Google all of those stats and facts just by why is art ed important, why it's good for kids. But yeah, so yeah, I'm just going to share some of the things I see, like you just talked about, but like all of the things that we as artists do and that we do in an art room are like really essential just for like being a competent human today, like those life skills, those 21st century skills. Some of the things you talked about, but like ideating, like we do a lot with like how to think creatively and generate like ideas, and not just one idea, but like multiple solutions. So like the act of brainstorming, like convergent or divergent and convergent thinking is so important. And I don't think people ever like intentionally practice that, we do a lot of researching. So like visual research and, kind of like what you do in other classes, but like taking things from different sources and synthesizing it into something entirely new. We like design and plan projects, like iterate and experiment, obviously create, duh. There's like continual like assessing and reflecting going on like through the process, and there's continual like revising, and like just self-reflecting, but also like getting feedback from others, which we already talked about. Writing about your work, presenting your work to an audience, like that's huge. And then like, yeah, dealing with that feedback. So it's just so much stuff. I feel like people don't realize that it's not just like making a pretty picture. Look what I did. Like I made a flower. It's like pretty intense.
It's really cool. It's so much metacognition, and it's so much just thinking and planning and being patient. All absolute life skills, but way more deep and involved than we might think on the surface if we're not art educators ourselves, or it's been a long time since we've been in an art class. So I appreciate you bringing that to the forefront for us.
Totally. And it takes time getting kids to do that. Like they just want to do their first idea. Like, well, this is my idea. I'm going to roll with it. And they don't want to do the research or like, dive deeper into it or make sketches and plan. And, and so it takes like effort, like getting them into that like artist's habit, I guess, of like, this is what artists do, dude. Yeah. So yeah, that's huge. Like personally beneficial, I think. I think this is so important. This world that we're in is like super distracting, and all of our kids are super distracted with everything going on with the like social media and notifications and all of that. Like, yes. So in art class, like the intentional practice of observing, of truly seeing something, and like outward obviously, but both inwardly, you slow down and you have to become really present in that moment, in that act of creating, which I think is super beneficial for your mind, for your soul. And like getting into that, I think with art, like you can really get into that like flow state where everyone wants to achieve that flow state of creating, and that's what it's all about. Like I think it's a good meditation. I think it's really therapeutic for students, to just like slow down and like be immersed in like the act of creating something. So that's a
absolutely good one. Like a way to sort of process as well, or even empty out some thoughts. Like I use writing for that, and I can totally get in a flow state certain days when I'm writing, and it's because it's just like it's all coming out, it's just being released, and or I am really meditating on one idea or problem or thought, whatever it is, and it's just the words come out, and I can see that with art and images and creating in that way as well. So I think that's so important too, and just to slow us down and get us away from a screen, or get us away from all the alerts, like you said, and the distractions. Yeah. That's just really important. Yeah.
Totally. I make my my Art 1 students, we do something called blind contour drawing. I don't know if you've ever done that before.
No.
So it's really like the first step in learning how to see. You're observing something, and you're basically tracing it with your eyes very slowly, like at the pace of an ant or a sloth. You're tracing it with your eyes as your pencil follows on the paper. And the kids like, it is so hard to do, because I'm like, you need to, we start with a 1 minute blind contour, and then we go to 2, 3. And, it's really building that brain muscle of focus that it is so hard to do. But like anything, the more you do it, you're connecting those neurons together and forming those bridges, building those muscles, and it gets easier and easier. And you're, better able to like just slow down and focus. And it really helps with drawing also.
That is really cool. Yeah. Do you have a favorite lesson or concept or kind of area within art that you like teaching or something that's been really successful?
Yeah. So again, it's none of those like favorite questions, Natalie, which is
I
so
know.
hard.
Sorry.
That's okay. So I'm just going to go with my favorite lesson right now because I
Yes.
did this assignment with my illustration class. And I absolutely, it's just so cool. So it's called One Object, Five Ways. And students choose an object. It's pretty straightforward. So any object, and they have to illustrate it 5 different times using 5 different mediums or materials they work with, or methods like how they use the material. So it's the first module of the year, which the module or like the unit is called experimenting with mediums and methods. So the purpose is like just really to get them innovating and experimenting with new ways of working and getting them out of their comfort zones. Like that is the biggest part because a lot of
Yeah.
my students like find something that they like, find something that they're good at, anime, for example, and they just like want to stick in that, which is great to find something you like and you're good at, but that's not all there is. And like to be an artist, like it's really about pushing those boundaries of like what you can do. So that was really the objective of the assignment. It was really about like the process of like playing and seeing what happens, like not really the product.
The experience more, the
Yeah.
experience over the actual end result.
Yeah. So they had what they had to do is work with either a new medium that they haven't worked with or a medium they've used before in an entirely new way. So like someone can use pen, for example, but maybe they put a limitation on it. Like they can only draw their object with horizontal lines, or just working with it in a new way.
Ooh.
So we started by looking at, like the variety of media and methods illustrators work in, both like traditional and non-traditional ways to create images so they can see all the possibilities. We brainstormed all of the different traditional media like pencil, all of the non-traditional materials they can use like coffee and makeup. And like the results
Fun.
are incredible. Like I had a student paint a beautiful pair of glasses with mud and like get all the different shades of the mud. And like another one created these glass jars by drawing with different colors of string and yarn glued on paper. And they never would have done that before. And it's so cool just to see like all of the innovation,
Yes. Pushing them out of their comfort zone first off, and then forcing them almost
Yeah.
to express creatively in a way they haven't before, in a manner they would never have chosen if you hadn't mandated this constraint, which always seems to make us more creative.
Yes, it's so fun. So there was this like poster that I kept like blasting them. Do you know who John Spencer is?
No.
He's a teacher, but he's like super. He has like a like blog and podcast. He's super innovative and really creative. But he has this poster that he made. It's kind of like an infographic, and like the big question on like the top of the infographic is, "Am I sure this will work?" If the answer is yes, then that's the status quo. If the answer is no, that's innovation. So like I kept trying to push them, like if you don't
Ooh.
know if it's gonna work or not, right? Like you got it, just see what happens, go for it. And you're gonna have flops, right? But there's value in that too, like the takeaways of like experimenting.
Right. Being a risk taker, like a healthy, safe, but risk taker, and
Yes.
experiencing the product that doesn't come out the way you wanted it to, and the one that surprised you and came out awesome. Like the mud one
Totally.
sounds
Yes.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
And all
that's
of these,
so neat.
oh yeah, totally. I was just gonna say all these experiences, like, you might never paint in mud again, right? But like the takeaways from like that experience, like what did you learn like that you can apply to future things? Like I think there's like a gem in like every experience. It's like finding that. Or like what not to
Yes.
do.
Well, and sharing that with your students, there is a gem in every experience. Yeah, what
Mhm.
to do, what not to do, all of that. That is valuable life learning. Your class is so inspiring. Amanda, it's so inspiring to hear you speak about how you teach art, your passion, obviously, for art
Mm.
and creativity and innovation. It's awesome. I love that you have a favorite of the moment because that just means every day and every module you're innovating to, as we all should be. So that's pretty awesome. If you're up for
Yeah.
it, I have one last question for you.
Okay. Give it to me.
I am asking all my guests this season who their favorite teacher growing up was and why. So I am curious, who is Amanda VanBuren? I know it's a favorite question again, but who is that teacher who you think back on who really had an impact positively on you as you were going through school?
Yeah, this one actually is an easy answer. Hands down, Mr. Bone, and it's Bohn, not like bone, like your femur. But he was my creative writing teacher my senior year of high school. So this was like back in the 90s. When did you graduate from high school?
2001.
Okay, so I was a little older than you, but this is a throwback. I think you can remember this. But back in the 90s, like Seinfeld was a super big show. And
Yes.
okay, I was obsessed with it. We were all obsessed with it. Everyone loves Seinfeld. It's still cool today.
Everyone still loves Seinfeld.
Yes, it holds up. But Mr. Bone was really amazing at connecting whatever we were learning to some kind of reference in that show. And he just was really good at getting engagement just through Seinfeld. It was hilarious. It was genius. That's like actually not like the main reason why he was my favorite teacher, but that was yes. I love that about him.
That's fun. That was his hook. He got you.
His hook, yes. Seinfeld hooks everyone in. But like almost more importantly, he saw something in me that I didn't know I had, and like that I was a really good creative writer. And he pushed me to share. I am not someone that likes to put myself out there and be in the spotlight. And he pushed me to share my writing and like submit it to our high school literary magazine, which, like I said, I never would have done on my own. But I gained a lot of confidence in my writing that, you know, not only can I share my ideas creatively through pictures, but I can also like craft my words creatively to tell stories. And fun fact, because of him, I actually ended up being selected as the class speaker at my high school graduation. And
what?
That's a big deal.
That's a huge deal.
Yeah. So that was my 5 minutes of fame.
Love it. Ah, thank you, Mr. Bone. That is really cool. I love that. And he did what now you do for students. Honestly, he pushed you to do something you wouldn't have done. And that's what it sounds like you're constantly doing in your art classes with your high schoolers. So his legacy lives on. That is so cool. Oh, Amanda, I have really thoroughly enjoyed this conversation and this time with you. It has been such a gift. If listeners want to reach out to you, where or how could they do that?
So I used to have an art website, which I don't anymore because I didn't want to pay the $12 a month on Squarespace. So I'm cheap. And I wasn't making art, but I got to get back into it.
Yes.
My FCA email is probably the best way. AVanBuren. So AVanBuren at frontiercharteracademy.org.
Awesome. I know there is just going to be an art educator out there who's got a burning question and they need to send it to you. So I want them to be able to. Thank you again so much for your time, for your joy, for your inspiration. It's just been really great speaking with you and hearing all that you have to say about art and art education and how we can make the online world work, even for something as physical, as relational, and as important as art. So we appreciate all that you're doing.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And it's just about being creative and open-minded. And I think you can figure out a way to do anything.
I love it. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thanks for listening to this episode of SYS Presents Adventures in Online Education. Special thanks to my lovely guest today, Amanda VanBuren. Today we learned that art is certainly way more than making pretty pictures. Art is about observing, researching, experimenting, working creatively within constraints, and reflecting. I hope you feel as inspired as I do after today's conversation to go make something and be creative. Thanks again for listening. If you liked what you heard today, please hit subscribe and give us a rating. On Twitter, you can follow me, Natalie Conway, at AOE Natalie, and the show at SYS Presents. If you're interested in finding out more about SYS education, head to syseducation.org. This podcast wouldn't be possible without our exceptional team at SYS Education, including sound engineers Natalie Farrell and Matt Duran, and our producer, Bo Neal. Thanks for listening, and remember, we can learn new things.
Thanks for listening.